Hello there, everyone. Welcome back to Keeping Up with the Seattle Kraken, Circling Seattle Sports' weekly Seattle Kraken show. Uh, and as Jade said to me before we started this, it has been a long week since the last time that Jade and I connected here for the show. We were going over what has taken place for Seattle over the course of the past week, and it's been some major and pretty dramatic news. Our run of show will look into the past week for the Kraken in this current season that just about seems if there was this shred of optimism over a couple of solid weeks in the middle of January where Seattle was still hanging around and the matchup on Sunday against Calgary was pretty impactful, not only because, Seattle needs the points and needs to keep going, but also because the Flames are a team ahead of them in the wild card race, and it did not end so well. We'll talk about that. Last Wednesday, long time, well, Kraken original, sorry, not long time, goaltender Philipp Grubauer was placed on waivers, cleared, and is now with the team's AHL affiliate Coachella Valley, and what seems to be more so now a conditioning stunt to get him, back up to full strength. And Yanni Gourde had surgery to repair a sports hernia and will be out 5 to 7 weeks, which pushes him out in terms of that 5 weeks period out just before the NHL's trade deadline. So, uh, I mean, looking at this upcoming, well, not the upcoming week, the past week, Jade, last week when we talked, they had won the Buffalo game, they had lost that Washington game with some mistakes, and then they beat Pittsburgh. And looking ahead, I was like, well, that back to back, I was like, you probably lose to Edmonton because he just play really bad against Edmonton. It needed to take care of business against two of the worst defensive teams in the league in Anaheim and San Jose. And you did that against one team. And then you had Calgary yesterday, which is why this is being coming out later than it normally does when we do the show, because we couldn't record on Sunday. Um, And yeah, that was one of the most unique hockey games I've seen in that building in four
Mm-hmm.
years covering that team. So we'll start from the beginning. In this game against Edmonton, the Kraken hosted their mom's trip. Um, from the Edmonton game. This is a back-to-back, as you remember from last week, to Tuesday against Anaheim, and Seattle started the game out really well and on the road against the Oilers. They scored 2 goals in the first period to take a 2-1 lead into the first intermission. They give up 2 goals in the middle frame. Unfortunately, this was Connor McDavid's first game back after suspension. He scored the tying goal in that second period just less than 2 minutes into the game off of a rebound. He just was able, it's going down on Joey Decord, gets a shot and gets the rebound right after to just kind of loft it over. Some mistakes. Corey Perry gets a goal in this one to give Edmonton the lead, and then Matthias Ekholm, empty netter, deep into the third period, makes this a tough loss. I mean, just considering how well Seattle had played in the beginning of this game, um, and how they kind of hung around. uh, you would kind of I thought that they might do something. Um, I get hope, which is foolish, but
Yeah.
ultimately with that one, the Oilers won seven of their last nine at the time. They stay hot and they get McJesus back, so that was rough. Um, and then the game that again maybe I foolishly thought would be a nice way of a bounce back. But also the fact that Seattle has not won a back-to-back, the second game of a back-to-back at all this season. I shouldn't have thought about that. This game was also weird, Jade, if you'll remember. Um, with, coming out of the gate, this was just a barn burner. Seattle scores three in the first period. Anaheim scores two. This was just a really ugly game for Seattle defensively and highlighted really the defensive issues that we've talked about for
Mm-hmm.
weeks, right? Anaheim scores three in the second period. Four of the five goals against that weren't empty net because Anaheim gets an empty netter late into this one. Frank Vetrano gets one after Shane Wright got a power play goal pretty early into the third period to make this a one goal game. Seattle not able to get another one. For the five goals against Philipp Grubauer in this one, just really were an example of poor defensive play and just really setting your goaltender up for failure and hanging him out to dry, which is what Dan Bylsma said after this game, as he was very curt to the point. Uh, we talked to Brennan Montour and Ellie Tolvanen after this one, and they were both brutally honest about how they needed to be better in front of Grubauer. Um, and you could tell the vibes were a bit off.
Hmm.
Just it just didn't feel great in the locker room, right? And Dan took a long time after the game for us to hear from him. And the next morning, Grubauer was placed on waivers. We'll talk about that in a minute. We have to go to the San Jose game on Thursday. Seattle wins this one in big fashion. They win 6-2 against the Sharks. So they do what they should have done earlier in the season against San Jose, which is now a moot point. You can't go back and get games. Chandler Stevenson opens the scoring. Anaheim ties this up late into the period, and you kind of go, oh, well, you go into the first intermission tied at one with San Jose. And it's like, well, this is not good. This is we're gonna get back into the shit. Um, but Seattle uses a four-goal second period, ultimately to run away with this one after 3 days to begin the week of losing to Edmonton, losing to Anaheim, placing Philipp Grubauer on wave. Just a really, in terms of vibes, a really down start to the week. And then we get to Sunday. They had Friday off and they had practice on Saturday. Um, Sunday against Calgary. I mean, I think a win against Calgary would have put them, I think, 6 points out of a spot and would have gotten two critical points against, again, a team that's occupying the second wildcard spot right now. And the weirdest first period I've ever seen there ultimately dooms Seattle. Um, and I think that was any like the final nail that there is going to be for the Kraken in terms of their postseason hopes for this year. Oh God, not Chandler, Jaden Schwartz had gotten what looked like the opening goal of the game that was challenged by Calgary and ruled as goaltender interference. Um, right? That was that one.
Hmm.
Yeah, because Dan Vladar got his stick wedged into Jaden Schwartz's skate. Hockey people smarter than me looked at this as the correct call, which I understand. Sure, Jaden was not upset about it, but he thought in the locker room after the game when we heard from him that, well, he put his stick into my skates. Um, but yeah, I mean, from what I understand, they understood that one. What wasn't understood was no, the Sharon Govich goal, yeah, because Morgan Frost, I'm just gonna stare at you for that one. Morgan Frost, recently acquired from the Philadelphia Flyers. Don't know who watches that team. Um,
Me
Scored his
either.
first goal for Calgary in this one. It just had to be against Seattle. How nice.
Hmm.
Um, Yeah, he Morgan Frost gets one. I think it was relatively quickly after the Schwartz disallowed goal, which is kind of a kick in the teeth there, and it's like, well, this sucks. Yegor Sharangovich scored a power play goal. This period was filled with power plays and just a lot of special teams, which not the greatest if you want game flow. And with a team like Calgary that does have some talent and it's kind of been sneaky good this year. Um, I just would prefer to not send them out on the power play. But the issue with this goal was that Sharon Govich got all alone in on Decord, um, and it was a weird goal when it happened in real time because I don't I think he did it on purpose, but it didn't look like it about how he kind of he went to Decord's left which would have been his right, and the puck just kind of continued. It almost looked like um, a trick that he was trying to pull. And it was just a puck that Joey normally would melt down. And well, any goalie really would have melted down. And you say, well, what the hell? Like that's a leaky one, which you're not used to Joey doing. But again, with his workload that we have also talked about,
Hmm.
um, I thought, okay. But after looking at the replay and seeing the replay, uh, Joey's left arm gets pinned down by Sharon Govich, as what Toronto ruled because Seattle did challenge this one for goaltender interference, and I thought, oh boy, another challenge. And this took a while. I think I looked over at Jayd on my right and Scott Brendan on my left from Cheap Seat Sports, and I was like, if this takes this long, like it should be clear and obvious. Like everything I've heard about reviews in professional sports are, it needs to be clear and obvious. It needs to be decisive for them to overturn it. Um, nope. Toronto ruled that Sharon Govich was playing a loose puck, which I don't think it was a loose puck, and that was the reason for frustration. Um, Calgary, because of the fact that, oh, that's right, yeah, because Calgary was on the power play, and Seattle got the failed challenge because of the delay of game call that comes with missing that challenge and made it a 5-on-3 for Calgary. Oh, that's right, because there was also a slash it goal against Jamie Alexiak on the goal.
Yep.
So to make things even worse right after Calgary gets the goal, the Flames go on a 5-on-3, and Jonathan, oh, I forgot who it was. I know I'm not supposed to like him, but the Calgary TikTok's kind of funny. And I think it's Sharon Govich actually who says it. Jonathan Huberto was left wide open to Joey's left for a slap shot and makes it 3-0. And it was you just go into that first intermission and you're like, what the fuck just happened?
Hmm.
Right?
Well, it
Right.
doesn't help that the period started at
Oh yeah.
6:08, and I looked at the game summary, event summary. I can't remember exactly which one on the NHL website, and it ended at 7 o'clock on the dot. Well, 7 o'clock
Oh
somewhere. They didn't put like the seconds in there, but
yeah.
it ended at 7. So I think it was actually closer to 7:01. So they had essentially a 43-minute first period, which is, I tried looking up the longest period in NHL history, like longest first period specifically, and
Mm.
that's not recorded. And I feel like I've talked about this before where I'm trying to find a stat and it's not recorded, and then I'm like, okay, I'm gonna go back and do research, and I never do because that's a lot of games to go through. But
Yeah.
it felt like the world's longest first period. So,
Yeah. No, it's definitely weird because you said that to me and I looked at my watch and I was like, oh shit, it's still 7 because yeah, with the Sunday game we got the 6 o'clock start. And with the occasional fracas in the first period, the two challenges, the different penalties. How many? I can look at the penalties here. Yeah. Um. Oh my God. Yeah. One, two, three, four, five, six, seven, eight. 8 penalties in total in that first period. Um. Yeah. I went and looked back at Morgan Froskel was pretty good. Um, he splits
unfortunately,
the Dunn Larson pairing, and he's got Larson on his hip, and he's still able to fire up a shot that just a quick wrister that oh God, that was a pretty nice goal. That beat Joey Glovehand, and I'm like, well, that's a pretty good goal. This power play one, yeah, I'm seeing this again. Calgary enters the zone. Oh, Sharon Govich splits Larson and Alexiak. Yeah, because it was this looked like a leaker, and I was like, "Oh, Joey." Yeah, they get in. Michael Backlund finds Sharon Govich. Oh yeah, he went to hit it again before Joey went down. Joey goes down here to get that one. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Okay, because it rips his glove hand up. and
Hmm.
from melting it down like he normally would. But Toronto voted against that, God forbid. Um, yeah, Seattle challenges, Huberdeau scores. We go into the first intermission kind of questioning what in the world has happened. The rest of the game in a vacuum was good. I mean, Seattle scored the next two goals unanswered. Capo Caco gets a nice one on the power. No, not the power play. Sorry, on a 2-on-1, Jaden Schwartz finds him for a nice shot that had to be perfect because Dan Vladar was pretty well in position and got his glove, I think, in position. But he unleashed a nice shot. And they were really buzzing. Like it really felt like a second goal was coming in that period. And then Seattle takes a too many men call. And it just is kind of the kick in the teeth. You're buzzing, you're creating shot opportunities, you're dominating possession in the offensive zone. You're generating all sorts of chances. And then it was funny because I remember seeing it happen. Seattle was cycling at the top of the blue line. They had gone with the Dunn Montour pairing to get more offense, right? And I think it was Vince. Um, Kako's going to get a change. I see him put his glove up, which I think he's trying to be like, "Hey, don't look at me." Um, Dunn passes to him, and Andre Burakovsky has come on for the change already, and Capo uh, touches it because it's right at his stick. I mean, it's a good pass in that regard. But then, as the refs are looking at him to make the too many men call, I just see him with his head down as he goes towards the middle because it killed what was again a great cycle. Seattle does get a second goal in the form of a Brandon Tanev deflection out front, 5 minutes and 41 seconds into the third period, and they looked good for parts of that third period as well, but they couldn't get the winner, including um, miraculously with the empty net. Brandon Montour is able to make a stop for what seemed like what was easily an empty netter. Um, and then towards the dying seconds, Seattle made a power move but couldn't get it to go. Um, it's a lot of me talking. And it was an interesting week. I don't know. Like before, not mentioning the Grubauer waivers and the Gourde injury because we'll talk about those. How do you put the past week into words from your perspective, Jayd? Because obviously a lot has happened in the hockey world in general over the past week, in the sports world as well. But
Yeah,
this team, um, and I'll talk about it when you're done here, but it just kind of seems like this is if there was a game that they needed to win to keep things afloat and keep whatever little hope was alive going, it was this. Um,
I
so
I agree with that. I can't remember exactly what I said on last week's episode where we talked about like hopes for the upcoming week, but I feel like I was a little bit more optimistic. Uh, and I'm just not anymore. I think that, there has always been the air of like the Kraken aren't making playoffs this year, and that's fine. We all kind of knew that going into this season, but then for, you know, bursts of moments here and there, it felt like, okay, maybe we really do have a chance. Maybe there really is a chance that the Kraken will somehow sneak into a wild card spot. And currently they're sitting seventh in the wild card
um,
for the Pacific Division. No, the Western Conference. And I think,
10 points out.
yeah, 10 or 11 points out. Um, and that's just not likely, especially coming up on, what they have coming
Ugh,
towards them now with the Red Wings and the Maple Leafs
Calgary again.
and then Calgary again. And, Calgary's always a tumultuous opponent. There's just always something that happens in a Calgary game. So yeah, I'm not feeling super confident in the past week, and that's also a-okay. I'm hoping that Grubauer being sent to the AHL or, assigned to the AHL, because sent to makes it sound like it's a bad thing, and it's not a bad thing for a player to go to the AHL. Sometimes that's really what they need. So I'm hoping that, going back down there will kind of help him reset and theoretically, ideally, come back to the Kraken kind of ready to go. Yeah, the past week it's been a rough one for a lot of hockey fans, Kraken and otherwise. So,
Yeah.
yeah, I Kraken specifically though, I'm not like super doom and gloom anymore because you tank the season and then you get closer to first overall pick. That's fine.
Yeah.
Whatever works.
Yeah.
So that's kind of how I'm feeling. It's a little bit less like, you know, oh my God, they're not going to make playoffs. It that doesn't matter anymore,
It's more
in my opinion.
acceptance.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that
Just also kind of really do the best you can. They're on the first year of a new coach. They're on the first year of two large contracts with Stevenson and Montour, and that doesn't, and there's a couple, pending UFAs, pending RFAs, and the trade deadline is a couple weeks away. And
uh
at this point, I'm not going to use the word rebuild and I'm not going to use the word retool, but rework the team a little bit. And also, a lot of them are still, it, I like to think, it doesn't take 82 games to get to know your line mates or 82 games to get to know
I
your defensive pairings. But
would hope not.
yeah, there's still kind of that, feeling of like they're under a new coaching staff, or they have new line mates, they have new deep pairings, things like that. And so I think that there's a little bit of everything going on. And I'm hoping that coming up on the deadline, they do something. Um, and then that next year they can kind of come out of the gate a little bit more ready to go.
Yeah. I mean, I understand not wanting to use it. I think I have to. Like, they
I just
need
don't
to
like it because
retool.
it seems so like so official.
Yeah, sure. It does seem like something that you'd hear in a presser. It's like we need to retool. Yeah.
Hmm.
Um, I think there are two things that you need to do. One, you don't need to do anything I say. Don't listen to a man. But also, like, I think to move forward effectively, you need to admit fault. I think the organization needs to do this as well. You need to admit fault. This didn't work. We are past trying to rekindle what the team got in year two. That was
Hmm.
never sustainable in the first place. If there were teams that could run four lines of middle six guys, all four lines, um, and get that scoring, I feel like it would have been done before the Seattle Kraken existed. It would have been cool if they were the first one to do it and they started this revolution of not needing a superstar. Uh,
Playoffs would be much more sustainable if that was the case.
yeah. So that would have been nice, but it is not reality. Someone who is interesting in their own right posted the team's roster from that playoff season and said, and it was just like, well, it was after I think the Anaheim game. I was like, this is just not. I don't know how this is relevant. I don't know how bringing back an Alex Wenberg makes this team any better. Like I was like, this doesn't make sense. Um, so you need to kind of, I think a reflection is necessary, and I think a lot of people have already done it, right? But if you haven't, I think that reflection is necessary. Um, because we're not going to see a lot of these guys who have been around from either the inaugural season or the second season. They won't be around much longer. I know
Hmm.
um, Jen, who listens to us, I think it's Nordy Jen on Twitter. I'm not calling it X. You can eat shit if you think I'm calling it X. was listening and said mentioned I think last week when I talked about how there will be change and the fan base needs to be ready for that. However you prepare for that, I'm not saying it's going to be easy, but it's coming. And that was always going to happen with an expansion team, right? Um, for better or for worse, there will be guys who get to go to better situations in terms of chances to win a cup. It's just a reality of the situation.
I
Uh,
think Will Borgen is a really good example of that also. He was pending UFA at the end of the season and um, he had been with the Kraken since the inaugural season.
yep. He was
Okay,
their pick from Buffalo.
that's what I thought. I just sometimes second guess there's too much going on up there.
Eh,
So yeah, even he's a good example of, you have to, as a fan, be prepared for moves to happen. And especially, this is a kind of sidebar, but with the cap space going up over the next
Yep.
3 years,
Yep.
um, it's for the Kraken specifically, it is, I think, going to make contracts like Stevenson, where, the the people of Twitter are not thrilled about the contract, which not that the people of Twitter really make or break the franchise, but
Sure.
it's gonna make certain contracts a little bit easier to stomach
Mhm.
if they don't get moved in the offseason or at the trade deadline or whatever. And B, it's gonna give a chance to open up more space to acquire the pieces that the Kraken need to bring in to make it to playoffs sometime soon again.
I
I'm not
just
even gonna say next year because yeah, but soon, hopefully. So I think that there's a couple different moving pieces in the upcoming years that are gonna make things a little bit easier for the fans.
Yeah. I think it's important, yeah, to mention the salary cap going up because that is something that will make some of those contracts more easy to stomach. And just yeah, will help them as they look to get better next season. They still have to extend Capo Caco. You need to
Hmm.
give Riker Evans a new deal, so their projected cap space will already, be eaten up a little bit depending on what they do at this deadline and then the off season. Um, Shoot, I lost my train of thought. But yeah, no, I mean
I
it
forgot where
just
we started there.
it
Yeah.
needs to be noted that things will be different. Um, I don't know if it's gonna be a super sell like some people think. I don't think it'll be a fire sale at the deadline from people I've talked to. It'll probably be a lighter one. Depends, I think, I guess how Ron, still in position, still at the GM position, wants to approach that and wants to, if it depends also if he's going to be here next year. A few people I talked to said that after the Anaheim game, they thought two things were going to happen. One of two things would happen. Either Grubauer would go or Ron would go. And obviously it was Grubauer.
Hmm.
Um, so I just wonder if that pressure is, hey, you need to get us ready for next season or you're gone, or hey, like they're not going to talk about it yet, but internally maybe they're ready to move on from Ronald.
That also, this is kind of bouncing around from different teams, but the San Jose Sharks, for example, who have also not been, phenomenal this season. They have been like super standout, even with Macklin Celebrini and Will
Mm.
Smith, hockey, not actor. Sometimes
Huh.
that has to be differentiated. They even on podcasts, I've had to hear people like, no, it's the hockey player, not the actor. Anyways,
Yeah.
uh, even they have kind of bounced back and forth between at the deadline, they're going to be a fire sale and no, they're not going to be selling or, they're just going to kind of make one or two moves. So I feel like it's not, I feel like the entire NHL at this exact moment in time, 4-ish, 5-ish weeks ahead of the deadline is just kind of up in the air. It seems like everything just keeps changing day by day. And even last year, it didn't quite feel like it was moving around this much before the deadline. It felt
Nope.
like kind of last year I was in a much different position as a hockey enjoyer. I was more just a
Mhm.
fan than anything. And um, even then, though, I feel like I kind of understood like, okay, these teams are going to be selling, these teams are going to be buying, these teams are just going to kind of listen to offers. And if something works out, then it works out. And this year it seems more like all these teams are bouncing back and forth. Even the Penguins,
Hmm.
I don't know, 2, 3 weeks ago, somebody said that Kyle Dubas said it's going to be a fire sale and get what you can. And so, yeah, I'm very, very interested to see what happens this year at the deadline. And I'm actually really happy that the Kraken are not playing that day
Mm, yeah, that's
because
right.
I can focus all of my attention on trade deadline. They're also, so I'm kind of hyper focusing on this, but 32 Thoughts podcast came out today and
Mm,
I listen to part of it. I read part of the transcript just because sometimes I cannot be bothered to listen to.
people talk for an hour.
Yeah,
Yeah.
sometimes it's really hard, especially that early in the morning because it comes out on a different time zone. And
Hmm.
so sometimes it's easier to just like skim. Elliot Friedman said that uh, rentals at the deadline are going to go for a first round pick. And I can't remember off the top of my head how many the Kraken have, but that is something to keep in
Mm,
mind going forward is that rentals ahead of and at the deadline are going to be first round picks.
yeah. I'll look. Yeah, and that in that regard, I think that helps me kind of refocus what I was going to talk about because like if they're and this kind of brings a different discussion that I did want to talk about.
Sorry.
They've got one first rounder this year, one second rounder, no third rounder, two fourths, a fifth, no sixth, and a seventh. Um, and I think next year they've only got one extra pick in addition to their natural picks, and it's a second, fourth rounder, and then 27 is all just natural. Um, no, it brings up an interesting discussion, and we've had this in group chats, but not on here. Um, who's untouchable from this roster? Because again, I'll let you think about
As
that while
opinion or
if you're Ron,
okay,
I need your untouchables.
hold on. Let me
But no, I don't worry. I'm gonna yap while you do that. Because I was talking to folks today. Um, I was having discussions with folks I know in the organization today, and Ron's talking to people like
yeah.
he's on the phone. I'm not saying deals are imminent, like
It's so funny because I keep joking, Ron, pick up the phone. What are you doing?
no,
Even
yeah,
Thursday, it through my tears and upsetness, Ron, pick up the phone. Do something to counteract this.
from what I understand, he has been talking to people. Um, I don't know about who for sure, but he's active. Um, and there are players who do have value. So I'd think my untouchables, and again, you don't need to be ready right now. I'm just gonna go into this, but my untouchables would be Capo Caco,
Hmm.
23 years old, has already been a producer for you, um, and he can still hit another gear. I'm not, he should not go anywhere besides a Kraken jersey for several years. Shane Wright, I'm keeping Shane Wright. Um, Shane Wright, Brandon Montour, um, and Joey Daccord. That's four people. That is only
You,
four people. I'm
it,
yeah, that's
we,
it.
okay, in a group chat recently, we all, not we all, most of us made like a tier list or whatever of our untouchables.
Yeah.
I think that those were my four. I think I maybe added in one other player. I can't remember who off the top of my head, but yeah, those are my four that personally I would not move on from
I was
anytime soon.
thinking about Riker, but like everyone else, I think you need to listen to get realistically better.
Hmm.
Um, like I talked about it when I talked to RJ on Emerald City Hockey when we did our when we did our reaction to the Grubauer news, and I was plugging their armchair GM, and there was thing in that one where they were talking about he does this where he looks at Puckpedia and he answers questions and looks at scenarios. It's great. Again, I plug it for a reason. But he said if you needed to move someone to get real forward talent and you called Dallas and they need left D, um they needed a D man, uh
Hmm.
and someone and somehow the deal, there could be other pieces and have to be straight one for one, but Vince Dunn for Jason Robertson. And there were fans that said no to that. They said, I don't want to give up Vince Dunn for that. Jason Robertson is like, and again, not just as a Filipino, is a different level of forward than what the Kraken have right now.
Yeah,
We
absolutely.
haven't witnessed that sort of play outside of maybe the first half of Andrei Burakovsky's healthy career here in Seattle.
Hmm.
Maybe, you know. Um, so, I think a lot of the guys outside of that have pretty good value to the Kraken, and especially you want to talk about, yeah, guys being available for guys fetching first round picks. Jaden Schwartz is the perfect example of a guy you can sell high on because he has been producing. He has been healthy this season. Like, he's a veteran that has won a cup. He knows how to win. He's
Yep.
contributing. He could be a great middle six piece that could push a team over the top potentially, maybe, or just help them gear up for, excuse me, a a run. Like, he has a
I
lot
feel
of
like my
value.
only kind of issue with getting rid of shorts specifically at the deadline is, and I know everybody knows what I'm going to say next, is the 17-10-84 line. And I feel like it's kind of
Mm,
beneficial to keep shorts around through
yeah.
the end of the season because Kako's so new and
Mm,
in New York he was on the kid line and now that entire line has essentially blown up
yeah.
because Kako's in Seattle, Heedle's in Vancouver.
Mhm.
The other piece, I can't remember his name off the top of my head, is still in New York. And so I feel like, they had these three players together on this kid line, and that's great, except for where's the veteran presence on that line? So, in
Sure.
my opinion, coming into the trade deadline, unless there's like some crazy deal for Schwartz where you're getting something really great back and you're not having to give up too much, I feel like Schwartz is one to keep around at least through the end of the season and then maybe at the draft,
Mm,
dangling him for
sure.
some sort of trade. But in my opinion, I think that Schwartz is one to kind of keep around because Kako's so beneficial so far to this team. And, that's a piece that you want to keep around. And that's kind of my own personal opinion.
Sure. But,
Although I do kind of see giving him up at the trade deadline, depending on, I guess it really all kind of depends too, though.
yeah,
What's the return?
that goes back to what I was talking about earlier, and like, I don't think that they realistically sell off like that. I think there's two to three moves that'd happen.
Hmm.
Like, this is a more in the scenario of a fire sale. Like, 17 has value, 22 has value. There was the rumor about 95 being in talks. If someone wants to take 95, you give them
Please.
95.
Yeah.
Um, like Tanev, I that has to go, whether it's in the off season as a
Hmm.
UFA, um, or now. But yeah, no, Schwartz keeping him through the end of the season makes sense to me. I understand that. Um, yeah, and like you said, if something comes up during um the draft, that could definitely help. But at least with how he's playing right now, I think this is the highest his value will get at the
Absolutely. Yeah.
Kraken. Defensively, this was an interesting conversation, and I think after I finish this, I'll let you talk about your untouchables. Um, Defensively, this conversation came up with a few people that I spoke with today about this. Um, you've got four experienced D in Dunn, Montour, Alexiak, and Larson. Then it's like all kids and Evans, Flurry, Mahura. Well, kid, and then two like they're almost like teen adolescents, if we're using the kid terminology.
Hmm.
Um, if you have to move someone from that and considering value as well, Vince Dunn makes a lot of sense, unfortunately, because you've got Montour and because he is here on his contract a year longer. It would be a pretty bad look to trade him after one season into his what 7 year deal. Um, yeah. Well, no, not seven. Sorry. He signed through 27, 28. Um, I think Alexiak does move. I don't think he's here next season. Despite I know the Kraken like him. Um, but there's value there. Like if I paid for the NHL video game, which
Montour is through, it is a 7-year contract.
okay, I was like I'm pretty sure it was, but I don't know
From
why.
Puckpedia, he's on year 1 of 7
Yeah, I don't know
through
why
30/31.
this is this is weird. I don't know what I'm looking at then. Um, yeah, do you get what I'm saying? Like
Yeah.
I don't there's a lot I could look at in this regard. So yeah, my four would be Coke. Nope, not Coco, but I wouldn't touch him either. Kako, Wright, Montour, and Joey. I don't think you can like because Joey would have value if you got really super extreme, and this is tearing the studs off of this thing.
Yeah.
And if the franchise could afford to go into that, they can't though. They will want to be competitive next season. I need to drive that like if anyone thinks that because all of us in the independent media are talking about it, and I think it's been talked about in the bigger news as well. There is pressure to win right now. Like
Hmm.
it exists. I again look at what they did in the offseason. It wasn't the solution, but it was
Yeah.
an evidence of them trying to win. Um, like that pressure from the potential of an NBA team, being a matter of time, does
Hmm.
exist. Um, so I don't think they're tearing the studs off the thing. It would have been nice if
Moving,
this could happen throughout the course of 4 seasons, because we're not even done with 4 seasons yet,
yeah.
right? Um, but that's not where they're at anymore, unfortunately. So those are my four. Um, yeah, that's what I got.
Year 4, also my 4,
Okay.
for a lot of the same reasons. My only additional comment is that moving Joey would be the equivalent of moving uh, Connor McDavid or Leon Draisaitl or Quinn Hughes or something like that. Like
In
that's
terms of
kind of,
value to
yeah, like
Seattle,
you're
yeah.
just ripping the core of the team away, or like, a really big factor of the team away. And
Hmm.
that's just not realistic at this point in time.
No.
Um, Despite what Vancouver media says, because I am unfortunately really in tune with that. The, too much Twitter. Um, I just, yeah, moving Joey at this point would be silly. Moving Montour would be silly. Moving Kako would just, that would be,
That would, yeesh. Ew.
yeah. I, he's been such an integral part of the team since he joined, and that's not something that I expected to say at the time that the trade happened because I was a little bit bummed about it. Um, but he's been a really important part of the team.
Oh yeah.
So, and then obviously Shane Wright, whatever, everybody knows about Shane Wright.
Yeah, I just don't think
He's
you could
great. Yeah,
move
yeah,
him.
yeah. Yeah.
Like it doesn't make sense. And it's interesting to not have 10 on there, but just with his lack of um
Like a lack of producing, a lack of finishing this season, it
yeah, it
seems
just
like.
isn't there. And we've talked about it all season. And I
Hmm.
know people be like, "Oh, well, have you ever talked about?" Yeah, we shouldn't have to keep talking about it.
Yeah.
Like, you know,
I can't keep being a broken record for the same points over and over and over again. And the
oh,
17 10 84 line, it's great. And, I am going to keep pointing to the sign every single time that they do something because I enjoy that line. But as a whole, it's more 17 and 84 that are producing 10 that's maybe setting up chances or, doing a little bit here and there. But it seems like it's more, I don't know.
Yeah, I
The
mean,
line
it's
as a whole is
just
great, but you can't keep that line together forever. And if you're going to keep one piece, in my opinion, it's 84.
yeah, that makes sense to me. Um, yeah, I don't. It's very interesting. It is an interesting time with this team. I think after when I got home last night from the game and this morning when I was talking to folks about these things, I just kind of was like I just kind of laugh maniacally. I'm like they're in such a mess that they need to fix. Um I don't know how that goes. I mean, I at least wonder about Yanni in terms of the trade
Hmm.
deadline.
Well, he's still circling almost every single trade rumor, article, podcast, everything, tweet, everything that I listen to, see, whatever. Yanni's still kind of circling those things despite being out with the surgery,
Hmm.
which is interesting.
Yeah, because again, what his 5 to 7 week timeline, and we'll talk about him more and again in a second, and I think I'll wrap this thought up and we can get to Grubauer. Um, that timeline at the earliest, I think, gets him to the day of the deadline.
Hmm.
So that seems really close. I don't know. I don't know. He was around today. I will share this, and maybe it's more of a nice positive after all that we've talked about.
Yeah.
In the locker room after we were waiting to talk to Shane. Um, because I wanted to talk to him because Dan, pointed out his compete level last night and his battle level, and I was like, oh, that's a nice acknowledgement after a really ugly game. Um, and enough media wanted to talk to him, so we scrummed him. But we were waiting for Shane to get off the ice, and Berkey's in his stall, and Yanni's around, which is nice to know after he's had surgery that he's still around. He's around and just kind of like his workout stuff, and they're yapping because they all do, right? None more than
Hmm.
Monty, of course.
D
Um,
Allergic to being quiet,
he can't, he can.
lovingly.
Um, but Yanni's walking around, and Berkey's chirping him for being short, which I'm only 5'11", so I understand. But then Stezka, who's a big human being, and especially on skates, right? Obviously, goalies look gigantic with their stuff on.
Hmm.
He's like, stand next to him. And I'm like, what are you doing this for? Yeah, he's 6'4" normally, and Yanni's like 5'9". Um, and he goes, Stezka, can you see over him? And I'm like, oh my God, like what are we doing? So I don't know. That was funny to hear. Let's talk about Phil. So yeah, after the Anaheim game, I kind of was wondering something was gonna happen. I just wish it didn't happen while I was on a bus down to rain training because I was like, I already got shit to write. And then that happens. And poor Jayd, I think your charger had messed up the night before, and I was
Yeah.
like, hey, are you around? Because I was
It
like, this
was
is
like it's the part
major news.
MacBook, they have a charger that like plugs into another part of a charger, and it was the
Oh
part of the
yeah.
charger that plugged in the wall that just kind of shut out and had to get a new one. And then, yeah, I woke up to a phone call and I was like, who is calling me at this hour? And I roll over and I look at my phone and I'm like, okay, it's like 11:06. I should get up and look at the waiver wire. And so then I roll back over with my phone in my hand and I see your text and you're like, the news. And I'm like, what? What news? What is going on? And so then I like get on Twitter and I'm like, oh, okay, cool. Grubauer. Cool.
It was certainly certainly interesting.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, to look at that. Oops. Yep, threw my pen on the ground. Uh, because like, don't get me wrong. I need it to be stated because there are people who are freaks on the internet that I don't like. Again, like we talked about, I think last week even. Philip is not. Well, no, I talked about it. I think on the thing I did with RJ. Philip is not the perfect goaltender. I love the guy.
Hmm.
Hold on, I got to do this. right? I love the guy as a human being, and a lot of people in talking about this have separated the player from the person, and that's good. Like it's nice to know that that humanity still exists. Um, I just didn't like how some fans were attacking other fans for being upset about this. Like, let people be fans. Like, if it's
Hmm.
not being a bigot or an asshole, like, I don't understand why you're so up in arms about the guy or people being upset about losing, their favorite player or someone that they love. Like,
Yep.
why does it bother you?
I have a
Really?
lot of feelings on that.
Do you not have a hobby? Um, but, you know, I understand it. I thought that a buyout probably still is coming this off season. I just didn't think that we'd see anything like this in season because, and I think in the immediate knee-jerk reaction to this news, it was kind of his time here is over.
Hmm.
But that kind of became apparent that it wasn't the truth, um, in the hours after because I was told off the record that he was not going, like he's not gone, and that they expect him back. I believe before the road Philly game, which is in March. Um, so that gives him a good amount of time. Because yeah, they come back from the Four Nations. Oh God, we'll talk about that in a minute. The road Philly game is March 8th. That's the 9:30 a.m. start against the Flyers on ABC and ESPN Plus. That's a nightmare.
Well, that's
All right.
12:30 their time.
I don't, I,
So,
I don't like it. I
well,
don't.
yeah,
I'll deal with it. Um,
I still
but
might be boycotting.
um, I mainly meant that because it's on ABC and ESPN. Like that's all I
Oh,
care.
yeah.
Um, but yeah, and then on Thursday, Bilesma met with the media and said that going to Coachella Valley will give him some practice time, give him some game time to try to get his game back to where we all know and believe that it can be. Um, he was on the radio Wednesday night, and basically said that with the four games, wait, no, I think it was 5 games at the time. With the 5 games ahead of the Four Nations break, he said that there wasn't going to be a lot of playing time, and they thought that going down to Coachella Valley to fix things rather than trying to fix it at this level, basically was the better alternative.
Hmm.
Um, and that makes sense. There was worry about him getting claimed off waivers, and I'm like, no one's taking the 5.9 million AAV off waivers for that. I'm like, there's nobody that's gonna take that. I am not worried about that.
I didn't think
Um,
so either, but you never know. Every
yeah,
once in a while, the league will surprise you.
yeah. And then when we talked to Adam Larson on Thursday, um, he said it's always sad to see a player down like this. Even though he'll most likely be back here. Oh, that's so funny. That's funny. Um, he said another thing that Larson said, you look past the hockey side of things. It's a friend that's not here with us now. It's tough for everyone. Lars also mentioning that, these guys see their teammates more often than their family during the season. So obviously they get pretty close. Yeah, the Firebirds will play 4 times over the course of the Four Nations break, so it's plenty of opportunity to to do that. Um, to get games in. You know, Bilesma also said it can be very difficult trying to dig yourself out of that, referring to at least the numbers, because he did acknowledge that the last few games that he played, like the Detroit game and the Anaheim game, weren't his fault, but they still felt like he wasn't in the place where they want him to be, which I think is fair. Um, He said Gruby has been real diligent about it the last few weeks when he hasn't had a ton of playing time. He's worked really hard at trying to get his game back. I have a lot of respect in terms of how he's dealt with it. So he's working at it. Larson also said we're all responsible for how the season has gone so far. So um, you know, it's tough. It's a really tough situation. He played in the second game that the Firebirds played against the Texas Stars, obviously Dallas's AHL affiliate down in Texas. Um, it was a tough first period for Philipp. Um, I think both the goals were kind of catching him out of position to an extent. The second one maybe less so, just kind of an awkward bounce. No, the first one was kind of, I think, an awkward bounce off the wall, and Cameron Hughes got a wraparound, former Firebird Cameron Hughes. And then Cole Lind got one where Philip was a little bit out of his crease. He had come forward to try and take on the shot, and Cole Lind, another former Firebird, scored there. But after that, after those two goals, he was able to lock in pretty well and made some important saves down the stretch. Ultimately, recording 70, nope, 70. 27 saves on 29 shots as the Firebirds got an overtime win against Texas, and Daniel Sprong scored the game winner, very ironically. Um, Jade, I don't know. How do you? Oh, cat. Nope, that's a dog. Never mind.
Not a
Um,
cat, that's a dog.
how do you sort of reflect on all of this? Because it's obviously been tough. I like I was telling RJ on the show that we did, him and I did. I don't think Phillips ever really gotten a fair rap here.
I agree.
That's fine. It's just it's difficult to see, and I think it's just tough. You know, fans will get their wish. I imagine he'll get bought out this offseason.
Hmm.
But I think for the rest of the year, you need him because I don't like I don't know. I don't want to know maybe necessarily what a decent share of Alice games look like throughout the
Yeah.
rest of the season.
Y yeah, I agree with that. It's kind of it's again one of those things where unless you find some incredible deal at the trade deadline, which is not likely to happen because so many teams, goaltenders are not, there's not a big market for selling goaltenders right now. There's a big market for keeping your goaltenders or, needing to move them back and forth between the AHL and the NHL if you're certain teams. Um, I think that they're gonna need to call Grubauer back up. Like you said, I don't want to know what the Stezka show looks like. Not that I don't have faith in him. I want to be super clear for anybody that listens that is a wholehearted AHL supporter. I think that he could do fine. I think that this is not the team to put a new or a struggling goaltender in front of.
Nope. I think that's the
Um,
main part.
yeah, and putting somebody that he's never played an NHL game before, right?
Nope.
Okay, yeah, putting somebody that's never played an NHL game before in front of this team is just that's
Yeah,
that would
and
be a
and
really bad choice. And
like
Joey also can't shoulder the weight of everything. So you
nope.
have to imagine that they're going to call Grubauer back up at some point, even if he continues to be kind of, we're going to
Middling.
stick him back in front of a
Oh
bad
yeah.
team. I don't know. It that also just doesn't seem fair. And I don't like saying it like that, but, we're going to stick him back in front of a bad team. And
I think that's the reality of it though.
yeah, if he loses, he
You know,
loses. And maybe it's not just his fault. Maybe it's part of the team's fault. And I don't know. This whole situation has just kind of,
it's tough.
I'm a goalie defender, not quite to the extent of Milo, but I'm a goalie
Mhm.
defender. Um, and so this whole situation just, it sucks seeing it all kind of unfold the way that it has.
Yeah. Two things. One on Stezka. I mean, his numbers haven't been super great in the AHL either.
Hmm.
Um, 3 goals against is fine. His 902 save percentage is fine. But one thing that was like the possibility, technically a possibility, um, or at least some people wanted it to happen, uh, was Nikki Coco getting called up, and I'm like, the point you just made about not putting, a goalie who isn't ready or is too young in front of the way that this defense has been playing is exactly that. You bring up Nikkei Coco right now, and he plays a legitimate game. He's getting,
Hmm.
I'm not saying because of his ability, because I think he really possibly could be a good part of your future, the tandem in the goalie tandem going forward, in a year or two. Um, he gets shredded, and that ruins his
Absolutely.
confidence. And then his development's stunted. He's played 19 games with CV. He's got a 2.37 GAA. He's got a 912 save percentage. It's good stuff. Everything I know from scouts, he looks good.
Hmm.
It's not this year. It won't be this year. Um,
And it might not even be next year,
no. So,
but
you know, but yeah, you don't want to ruin that. Um,
that's also a hard. I know I've seen people saying, call him up, and I don't, it kind of feels like last year with Joey, where it was like, if you call this guy up, it's all the problems are going to be fixed and everything's going to be great and the team's going to win again. And that's really not the case for a multitude of reasons, but especially going on playing against the teams that they're getting ready to play against. You just can't stick a literal baby that's played 19 games in the AHL against a lot of these teams.
Yeah, I mean it was last year was so interesting because they just kept riding him for periods of time, and I was like, you're gonna break
Hmm.
this guy. Like he's never done this full time. Like don't and he was injured at points last season. So um, but yeah, I mean this is obviously just a tough situation. You just hope that Phil is able to figure some things out and
Hmm.
get the necessary work done. And I hope he leaves, some good influence on Coco because Grubauer is a guy who's won a cup. Like it's not like he's not knowledgeable.
Yep.
So um, that's
Not a
that.
bad guy, also not the worst goalie in the league.
No, yeah, that was something
Not the
too
worst
that
goalie in the league aside from, numbers that some guys want to point out.
yeah, and it's a team
I
game.
say
At the end of
guys.
the thing,
Yeah.
like.
Yep.
I was hearing from some folks talk about that. It's like, well, he's been the worst goalie in the league. Da, 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 da. I'm like, sure, the numbers will say that in terms of the numbers
Hmm.
you're looking at. But like, I know Allison Lucan was quick to point out in a conversation about that this is a team game,
Yep.
and so I'm like, yeah, that is accurate. We'll move on. And again, I imagine we see Philipp back. I just don't know when that would be, and I hope it's not right away outside of the Four Nations break because of
Hmm.
that back-to-back Florida Tampa Bay.
Yeah.
Um, and also the worry about that because that's a back-to-back. Are you playing Stezko in one of those games?
I sure hope not,
Are you asking
because
Joey to play both of those games, have a day off, and then play St. Louis? Like it's it's an interesting situation.
yeah,
Well, because then they play St. Louis on the 25th, and then they have a few days off and play. Yeah,
Vancouver at
then they
home.
play Vancouver on the first. I mean, I don't know. I don't want to look at that
Weirder
right
things
now.
have happened.
Um, Yanni Gourde, has been dealing with a mid-body injury, is what Dan Bilesma has called it all season. Effectively, there have been times early in the year where he wasn't on IR, where Bilesma said he's just kind of working through it, and the way he talked about it made it sound like this is something he's just gonna need to deal with. And I'm like, well, I don't like that. Um, I needed to say quickly, we love Milo. We mentioned our friend Milo. We love Milo very much. Anyway, back to the other. Oh, he's not a ginger. No, I was gonna say the other ginger. Nope. Um, he had been practicing. We had seen him. He'd gotten individual work. He skated with the team in Edmonton on last Monday. Um, and then he wasn't there. for the optional Tuesday, which is weird because normally they'll get their own work in. And he wasn't there. When did this happen? 31st. It didn't. Oh yeah, it wasn't there Thursday. And I said, "Where's Yanni?" And I think I pointed it out to some of our friends. I was like, "His stuff is in the stall after that Thursday practice. He didn't touch it." And then the next day, on an off day, it was in the Kraken posted an update. They sent out a news release, but they posted the update first. I'm like, well, that's nice. That Yanni Gourde has undergone successful surgery to repair a sports hernia or chronic groin pain that's common in athletes, and that his expected return date is approximately 5 to 7 weeks away. Yanni's 33. He has not played since January 2nd, against the Oilers. He played the entire game and then has been out of the lineup since, yeah, about um oh, that's right. Yeah. So, yeah, Bilesma confirmed that this was the same issue that he was talking about when I just mentioned. Um, yeah, it was interesting. He was described as week to week at some point, and Ron Francis did said he had made some progress, and it looked like he was on a return, especially after they sent John Hayden down. Um, but ultimately they opted for surgery. Yanni's name has come up in trade talks. Um,
Hmm.
I think Jade mentioned it previously that it's still coming up, despite him being out until essentially the deadline. Um,
Which kind of comes as a shock to me because usually a guy gets injured and other teams are like, "Mm, nope, don't want that," especially a guy at, Yanni's age and all that. But I don't, yeah, still coming up.
it's interesting because this is obviously a big decision. Um, I think he was getting close, and I think Bilesma said that ultimately they felt the best thing for him. He was getting close. They said he just needs to have the surgery. Um, so this is interesting to me because Yanni Gourde, again, another original Kraken. And I think he's great for a lot of reasons. He like Silvia. I don't remember which game it was, but there was a game that they just kind of lacked bite. And Sylvia tweeted, our other Kraken writer and another host for Keeping Up with the Kraken, mentioned, this game needs Yanni Gourde for Seattle. Yanni's intensity. He's a guy that wears an A. Um,
He's a guy that's not afraid to get into the middle of something or, start
Nope.
something. And I've tweeted a handful of times, which this is actually a ripoff from Charlie O'Connor,
Yeah.
Philadelphia Flyer beat writer legend, that in the middle of a scrum, you will usually find Yanni Gourde smiling.
Yep. That's right. Yeah.
So yeah, he's just one of those guys that it's kind of I'm not going to say like the heart and the soul of the team, but he's certainly a important part of the team. And so there's been a few games where I've been watching and I've been like, it kind of feels weird to not have Yanni here because he would be retaliating or, answering these hits or
Yep.
answering, these calls for fights or whatever and sticking up for his teammates, defending his teammates. And
And smiling
so
during it.
it's yeah, giggling in the middle of it.
Yeah. Um, I would, and I thought about this. Um, I don't know where Yanni Gourde's career is at, where he views his career at, right? Because, obviously he's reached the mountaintop of the sport when he was with Tampa Bay. He's been such an integral part of this franchise starting, whether that's on the ice or in the community. Um, he's done everything he needs to have done here. I don't think any fan would be upset at him personally if he got traded to a cup contender, outside of the fact that he had surgery,
Hmm.
right? Um, or even if he left in the off season. But considering that, I don't think like I think this team needs wingers. Um, I mean, if a centerman comes available in free agency or a trade, sure. But granted that Berkeley Catton, like, unless they really heavily shelter him and put him up in the press box a lot, which probably wouldn't be the best for his development. You want the kid to play because he can't play in the AHL next year, right? Um, like,
Well,
well,
it
unless
depends
they
on
get an
the weird
exception.
age
Yeah,
thing.
from what I understand, he can't play there next year.
Yeah.
Unless they work to get an exception like they did with Shane Wright, which I don't
There's
know.
also the approaching 20 or whatever the age. There was the weird thing that we found the other night
Yeah.
when we were talking about it, but yeah,
My
that's
point is he won't
yeah.
start there this year, this upcoming
Hmm.
year, right? Or he won't start here at least. I think it's highly unlikely.
Hmm.
So you need another centerman spot. What's to say if Yanni Gourde does want to be here, and I think that's realistic, what's to say you give him a small deal, a year,
Hmm.
say, hey, we want you back. We like your leadership. We think you're valuable. We think that fourth line spot for you is perfect with the sort of game he plays. And having you in this locker room is big. Having you as a presence, as you just talked about, as someone who will answer the bell is big. We want you back.
Yep.
I think that's realistic. And I don't think he'd be demanding a lot of money. Um, but also I would completely understand if he doesn't want to be here next year.
Hmm.
And he wants to chase something, another cup in that regard. But I, I don't know that. We haven't asked Yanni that because
Yeah.
also he's been injured, right? So I don't know. What do you think about his future? Because I know you've talked about the sort of effect that he has, but like with this injury, I imagine that he finishes the year with Seattle. Um, I don't know. What do you think about
Unless there's
this?
like a miraculous surgery recovery where he's back a week or two ahead of when he's supposed to be, which is not likely. I definitely, I personally see him finishing the year here, and then I wouldn't be opposed to seeing him signing a 1 year, not even like league minimum, but a 1 year
Yeah.
smaller deal with Seattle and kind of sticking around for one more year, especially because he's been one of two guys, him and Eberle, that um have had their seasons kind of cut short.
Hmm.
And it's always kind of rough when you see that happen. And um I don't know, I guess especially with Everly, have his first season as a captain. Now I think it's like 39 games not played or something
Oh, I can
is the
find that
stat that I
number.
saw, 39 or 40. But anyways, so he's one of those guys that I
37.
wouldn't, okay, close enough. I wouldn't hate seeing him back in the lineup next year.
Nope. And again, like that fourth line spot for the game that he plays,
Hmm.
I think makes a lot of sense.
It's a good spot for him. And
Um,
I don't see him getting much better on a different team unless it is a cup contender and he wants to go in another cup.
yeah. And so it's interesting. I mean, I think also it depends on what this team does this offseason because
Hmm.
looking here at the lusting here over the list of free agents, at least not looking at the grandpas. And I say grandpas, and I mean the 34-year-olds and Matt Duchene and John Tavares. Um, Mikko Rantanen is a free agent.
Hmm.
They're not gonna get him.
No, but
I
he's a
I
free
will
agent.
I will if the Seattle Kraken sign Mikko Rantanen this offseason, I will give away a Mikko Rantanen jersey. We'll do it. We'll do it.
Yeah,
It's not happening.
absolutely.
Um, yeah, they're a bunch of older centermen. Um, Claude Giroux, Jade, Claude Giroux. Hmm?
No.
Hmm? 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 Hmm?
Dro back to Philly, please.
Sam Bennett. Hmm?
That's not a bad one. Him and
Ryan Donato. No.
Sam Bennett and Montour have played together previously, and
Hmm.
I know that's kind of something that I've kind of noticed a trend where some GMs are trying to get past players back together to see
Mm.
if the lines or, the
Chemistry.
pairings that, yeah, the chemistry chemistry is still there. So that's one that I wouldn't, I don't know.
I mean, that's
Maybe
another
wouldn't be
winner,
surprised if that
you know.
goes somewhere.
Um, I don't know. I think that one's more realistic than Rantanen, but
Yeah.
I don't even, obviously I don't think that one's that realistic at all. Excuse me.
Kuzmenko's going to be a free agent in the offseason.
Who would know about him? What team is he on?
I don't know. I'm refusing to acknowledge it.
God, I'm going to Marcus Peterson. Yeah, I don't know. I'm
They're
pro.
actively working on a contract for him with the
Oh,
Canucks.
really?
Yep, I
Oh,
saw that
with
this
the Canucks.
morning.
Um,
After the second Canucks trade hit the timeline on Friday night.
well, and that was a thing that goes back to, and I don't want to, because we've already kind of gotten past that part of the show, but talking about the the moves with this team, like Vancouver has made moves, right? You
Hmm.
want to talk about upgrading and I think this came up in why uh I was the person I was talking to, after that Anaheim game about either Grubauer moving or Ron moving. Think about the players that have been traded over the 40 years of Seattle's existence in the league.
Hmm.
Um, you've seen a Jack Eichel move. You've seen a Bo Horvat move. You've seen a Mikko Rantanen move. Um, you've seen a lot of talented players move, and Seattle hasn't acquired. Uh, they've Oliver Bjorkstrand was a solid trade. Capo
Hmm.
Caco, good trade, but you've missed out on the big fish, right?
Yep.
Good GMs find a way.
Hmm.
So,
Unfortunately, yeah, they do.
yeah, no. So, well, let's look at this week ahead, Jade, that isn't very kind to Seattle. I was thinking about this also this morning, and I maniacally laughed again because, say Seattle had won that game, which is a 4-game point swing if they beat Calgary, considering they're chasing them in the wild card as well. Um, so that would have put them, what, 6 points out of a spot. They play tomorrow. They play the Detroit Red Wings, who since firing their first head coach and now with Todd McClellan in as their head coach, they have
They're
gone,
14-3-1, I think. 14-4-1.
yep, and they're on a 6-game heater right now. Then on Thursday, you play the Toronto Maple Leafs in Austin Matthews' big head, bigger than mine even. Would you believe that? On ESPN Plus and Hulu. And then the last game before Four Nations, you play Calgary. Again,
Hmm.
a team that has never dropped points in Seattle, which again, I know that game's on the road, but still is a fascinating fact. Um, this is obviously after Four Nations, but after Four Nations, the weekend after, you play the Florida Panthers and the Tampa Bay Lightning. It is a brutal February schedule, even considering the break that you get because of the Four Nations. Let me look to yeah, even the start of March isn't very fair to you.
No.
Well, in terms of competition, because of Vancouver, because of Minnesota, Nashville is a mess. Um, the Flyers aren't an easy team to play. I know they've had their,
Well,
and Jade will mention things, but I know they're not an easy team to play
they have been shut out. They just got shut out for the third time
in a row.
in a row
Oh.
during regulation time for the first time in franchise history
Oh,
yesterday.
yes, I did see
That's
that.
a very wordy sentence. The only time they've been shut out three times in a row is in overtime, essentially. So
Jesus.
they're also really not doing good. And I'm not saying that that has to do with Frosby leaving, but I am implying that things haven't gotten better.
They haven't played the Kraken yet,
Yeah.
so that's all I'm
Well,
saying. Oh, I closed the wrong tab. Yeah, that's looking too forward into the future. But this is gonna be very different than when I've asked this in the past. What do you want to see this week? Because I think that any hope they need to win because they've got what, less than 30 games left. They need to go
Hmm.
on the heater of heaters to do anything. And
Yeah.
even then they'd be scraping a playoff spot. Um, I don't know. What do you want to see against Detroit, Toronto, the Amulet Man, and then Calgary again? Because it's not an easy slate, and you effectively now like are out of the rat race. It's done.
Frankly, I want to see a fight in the first period, and I would like to see them leading after the first period, even if that ends up in them losing. I would like to not see trailing in the first period
Yeah,
after the first period.
that's something that,
Honestly the biggest thing that I can ask for.
yeah, and that's been an issue for them like most of their existence. They don't start
Hmm.
well. They like outside again. The second year is an outlier. We throw that
Yep.
out the window. It goes out like, you know. So
Dan has said a few times that, they need to come out and start better and this and that and the other thing, and then they just consistently don't, which I not blaming it on Dan, not blaming it on anyone specific. I'm just saying that it would be really nice to see them not come out of the first period trailing. Um, Even if it's, one goal or even 0-0, that's better than nothing.
what was interesting to me, and he said this earlier in the season, but someone asked him if it was a mindset thing, and he said he's
Hmm.
like, I think it is. I'm like, that's bad. Like, I'm not
Yeah.
blaming Dan either, but like, I think part of too, and this will wrap up the show, but part of the change that's going to happen with this team, is like there are habits that are bad with this team like
Hmm.
that, and giving up response like after in the Calgary game, after the Kako goal, they gave up a grade A chance and Joey had to bail them out.
Yep.
That like it could have been gone like that, and they don't even get to having a dramatic ending and almost being there. Like so I don't think that the drastic change, well, not drastic, but the changes that are inevitable will be the worst things in the world for a multitude of reasons. Whether it is, you know, uh, giving those veteran guys a shot somewhere else to get a cup, moving on from their contracts, just the sake of change, getting rid of bad habits, or the fact that the future is coming in the next few years, in different forms of players. So,
Hmm.
um, last sort of roll call, not roll call, last sort of last call. Do you have anything Kraken related from the past week that we didn't touch on, or you want to put a final stamp on?
Nothing specific, no.
That will wrap up another. Uh, Painful, sad, frustrating. Insert your adjective here. We're not a Mad Lib. Keeping up with the Kraken episode, we continue to think about our other co-host and writer and friend Silvia. She had an operation done this past week and is not this past week, but recently. Um, and poor Sylvia, like Jade here, has ties to another NHL team that has done some interesting things over the
Terrible,
past week,
awful,
past few weeks.
cruel.
And poor Sylvia was like, is still recovering, and I think woke up to a player that she liked covering and did a great piece on how important he was to Pittsburgh, and Drew O'Connor getting moved to Vancouver. Um, so thinking about Sylvia, and obviously, I feel like talking about this will get me even more hate comments than I normally do. Um, but with the just absolutely insane and terrifying um, immigration stuff that's happening in this country now, Sylvia's been great in providing resources for people to be aware, constantly on different platforms um, about ICE and to, you don't know anything. You don't know where your friend is they're looking for. You don't know anything. Sylvia's done a great job in that. So I wanted to take time at the end of the show to talk about her. and let her know we're thinking about her. Um, and her presence as well, you know. So, um, yeah, that's another week of Kraken hockey. Until we see you next week, do your best to take care of yourselves. Hopefully you don't have to deal with the snow or the ice around here, because if I have to crack my head open, I'm it'll be rough. So until we see you next week, take care of yourselves, be well, and do whatever you can to make today a great day.
Hey, Charles.
Hey, Jen.
Hey, where are you going to watch all those Kraken away games?
Kraken away games, making a push. I was thinking of coming here just because Rough and Tumble is the home of Circling Seattle Sports, only if that's okay with you.
I mean, I love that idea. Hope to see you here.